All right, here we're going to be looking at our notebook for section 5.5, and we're going to be doing some operations with functions. So that is this learning target right here. I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions. We've done this with numbers, but now we're going to actually do it with functions. Okay, so in your notebook, this is the paper that we're going to be really taking our notes in and filling in. So we're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. And here's some ways that we can write that and how it also looks like. Right? So when I'm adding my functions, f plus g of x, it equals this f of x plus g of x. When I subtract them, and when I multiply and divide them. So let's go ahead and look at our examples. So here we're given two functions. We're given our function x minus 5 is f of x, and g of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 15. Here I'm asked to add them. So to add my functions, I really and truly just, that's minus, add them together. So just like here, I see I've got some common things that I can combine, some like terms. So in here I have an x and here I have an x, so I'm going to combine those terms together. And I see I've got a constant here and a constant here. So I'm going to combine those terms together as well. So when we finish this, we always want to kind of live in standard form with our highest exponent first. So I'm left with x squared, negative 2x plus x is minus x, and negative 5 plus negative 15 is minus 20. Here I have my final answer. So sometimes you will see something like this, so it'll say f plus g of 4. So what that tells me is really add them together, and then anywhere you see an x, plug in 4. That's the only other thing that we'll see some examples of. Okay, so now let's go ahead and subtract our functions. So here it's really important to notice the order of these. So here I'm taking f of x minus g of x in this subtracting functions. But down here I'm told, in my actual equation, I'm told find g minus f. So order matters here. So I'm going to have my x squared minus 2x minus 15, that is g of x, minus my f of x, which was x minus 5. So here, just like when I'm subtracting polynomials, I'm going to distribute this negative sign into both of these following terms. So now I have x squared minus 2x minus 15 minus x plus 5. So then again, I find my common things that I can combine, my like terms, and I go ahead and I combine those terms. So now I have x squared, negative 2x minus x is minus 3x, negative 15 plus 5 is minus 10. There is my final answer, so for subtracting those different functions together. Okay, so always keep this in mind of which order are we going in. Okay, so now let's look at our next one. Let's look at multiplying. So here I'm told I have these same functions that we're working with. Go ahead and multiply these functions. Well, we're going to multiply them just like we've multiplied any other polynomial. Okay, so this you can multiply going across, or I personally like to multiply going up and down. So I'm going to leave this second one here, and I'm going to multiply it by x minus 5. So then I can go ahead and do this multiplication. Well, 15 times 5 is the first step that we have to do. And we know that it's going to be negative because it's actually going to be positive because I have a negative times a negative, and that's 75. A negative times a negative right here is going to give me 10x, and a negative 5 times x squared is negative 5x squared. I bring down a 0. X times a negative 15 is negative 15x. X times a negative 2x is negative 2x squared, and x times x squared is x cubed. So then I can go ahead and combine my terms that I have. So I end up with x cubed minus 7x squared minus 5x plus 75. So there's my final answer once I've multiplied them together. Now when you're multiplying, you can use any of the strategies that you've learned about multiplying different polynomials together. It really doesn't matter. So then here, this last one, dividing. So here we're going to be dividing f by g. So my f was x minus 5 divided by x squared minus 2x minus 15. Okay, so this can actually still be simplified. So let's go ahead and look at that. Whenever I'm dealing with a quadratic or a bigger polynomial, I always start by factoring that. So now I see my numerator stays the same. When I factor this, I see all of my possibles of a negative 15. So I've got 1 and 15, or a 1 and negative 15. I know I've got negative 3 times 5, or 3 times a negative 5. So this would give me 14, negative 14, 2, and negative 2. And I know I'm looking for negative 2. So here we go. So this would end up being x plus 3 and x minus 5. Here I see I have an x minus 5 in both the numerator and the denominator, so those will cancel out. So I end up with 1 over x plus 3. Now, this is something we have not quite gotten to yet. We're going to get to this in the next unit. So if you're not quite sure how I factored this out, that's okay for right now. The biggest thing to note is when I'm just dividing these functions, I have to keep the order important, and I'm really just placing one over the other and simplifying as much as possible. So in reality, doing these operations, performing these operations on functions is really not that much different from doing it with just the values and the numbers we've looked at before. It's just we're adding different values in as well. So now that you've gone through this, keep this with you. But now you're going to be spending some time working on those practice problems and actually working on doing these operations. And as always, let me know when you get stuck and have questions.